The worst moments in life never arrive with a warning. They don't knock politely before shattering your confidence. They simply happen while you're trying your hardest to believe tomorrow might finally be better than yesterday. That Thursday afternoon began with hope for Rowan Mercer, a 36-year-old single father who had spent 6 years putting everyone else's happiness before his own. By sunset, he would be sitting alone in a crowded cafe, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life by believing he deserved another chance at love. And just when humiliation seemed complete, a quiet voice from the next table would change everything with 2 simple words that neither of them would ever forget. Sit here. Before we begin this emotional journey, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who still believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts. Your support helps us continue bringing heartfelt stories that remind the world compassion still exists. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the sidewalks as Rowan parked his aging sedan outside a small downtown cafe. It wasn't the fanciest place in the city, but it was warm, welcoming, and quiet enough for conversation. His palms were damp as he checked himself in the rearview mirror. His navy button-down shirt had been ironed twice. His beard was trimmed carefully after his 8-year-old daughter, Hazel, had insisted he look like the heroes in the movies. Before leaving home that morning, she had hugged him tightly and whispered that she hoped whoever he met would make him smile the way her late mother once had. That hug stayed with him. Life had not been gentle to Rowan. His wife had passed away after a sudden illness when Hazel was only 2. Overnight, grief became responsibility. He learned how to braid little ponytails after watching online tutorials. He packed school lunches with tiny encouraging notes. He attended every parent meeting, every dance recital, every science fair, often feeling like the only father in rooms filled with mothers. He worked mornings repairing commercial refrigeration systems and spent evenings helping Hazel with homework. There were birthdays celebrated quietly, holidays filled with bittersweet memories, and countless nights when he cried silently after making sure his daughter was asleep. Friends often encouraged him to date again, but every attempt ended before it began. Either people couldn't understand the demands of single parenthood or they expected him to move on from the past as if love were something easily replaced. Rowan wasn't searching for someone to erase memories. He simply wanted someone willing to build new ones. After months of persuasion, his coworker had arranged a blind date. He entered the cafe carrying cautious optimism. The woman arrived nearly 20 minutes late without an apology. She barely looked up from her phone while greeting him. Within minutes she was asking uncomfortable questions about income, home ownership, and why he hadn't remarried sooner. When Rowan spoke about Hazel, hoping to share the most meaningful part of his life, the woman's expression changed into polite disappointment. She admitted she wasn't interested in raising someone else's child. The words were calm, but they landed like stones. She laughed awkwardly, glanced toward the door, claimed she had forgotten another appointment, and left before their drinks even arrived. Around them, conversations continued as though nothing unusual had happened. Cups clinked. Friends laughed. Music drifted gently through hidden speakers. Yet Rowan felt strangely invisible, as if embarrassment had wrapped itself around him. He stared at the untouched coffee growing cold. Maybe everyone had been right. Maybe his chance had already passed. Perhaps fatherhood had become the only chapter left for him. He wasn't ashamed of Hazel, not even for a second, but he wondered whether the world saw him as someone carrying too much history. He lowered his eyes. Then a quiet voice interrupted his thoughts. A woman from the neighboring table smiled gently and gestured toward the empty chair across from her. She simply said, "Sit here." There was nothing flirtatious in her expression. Only kindness. For a few seconds Rowan hesitated. Accepting invitations from strangers wasn't something he normally did. But something about her calm eyes reminded him of peaceful mornings after difficult nights. He picked up his coffee and moved. Her name was Maren Holt. She explained that she hadn't intended to interrupt, but watching someone experience public rejection had reminded her too much of her own past. Years earlier she had survived a painful divorce after discovering the man she trusted had been living a completely different life. Since then, she had rebuilt herself quietly, becoming an elementary school art teacher who believed broken things could become beautiful again. She wasn't there looking for romance. She had simply noticed loneliness sitting across the room. They talked for nearly an hour. Not once did Marin ask about Rowan's salary. Instead she asked about Hazel's favorite books. She wanted to know what made Rowan laugh. She asked whether fixing refrigerators had ever led to funny stories. She listened without checking her phone. For the first time in years, Rowan realized what genuine attention felt like. As daylight softened into evening, they walked outside together. There were no dramatic promises. No exchanged declarations. Only an honest conversation between two people who understood heartbreak. Before leaving, Marin smiled. She told Rowan that kindness should never feel unusual, even though the world often made it seem rare. That sentence echoed through his thoughts all the way home. Hazel opened the front door before he even reached it. Her hopeful face searched his expression. She didn't ask whether the date had gone well. Instead she asked the only question that mattered. "Dad, did you smile today?" He thought carefully. Then he answered yes. Because despite everything, he truly had. Over the following weeks Rowan and Marin exchanged occasional messages. There was no pressure. Some evenings they spoke about books. Other days they shared photographs of sunsets or funny classroom stories. Rowan learned that Marin painted landscapes every Saturday morning. She discovered Rowan secretly enjoyed baking cinnamon bread with Hazel on Sundays. Slowly, friendship grew where expectations had never existed. One rainy afternoon Marin visited Rowan's neighborhood community fair where Hazel had entered an art competition. Hazel immediately noticed the familiar woman from the cafe. Children often recognize sincerity before adults do. Instead of hiding behind her father, Hazel walked confidently toward Marin holding a colorful painting of 3 birds sitting on a fence. She explained that one bird represented her mother watching from heaven. Another represented herself. The third represented hope. Marin's eyes filled with tears. She knelt beside Hazel and complimented every tiny detail of the painting as though it belonged in a museum. Later that evening Hazel quietly whispered something Rowan never expected. "I think Mom would like her." The words nearly broke him. Not because they erased grief, but because they honored it. Months passed. Life remained imperfect. Rowan still worked long hours. Bills still arrived. Hazel still missed her mother during important moments. Marin still carried scars from betrayal. Yet together they discovered something extraordinary. Healing isn't the absence of pain. It's finding people willing to walk beside you while the pain slowly becomes lighter. Autumn painted the city with shades of amber and crimson. Weekend traditions emerged naturally. They explored local parks, baked pies, volunteered at community food drives, and spent evenings reading stories together. Nothing felt forced. One evening the electricity failed during a storm. Instead of frustration, they lit candles across the living room. Hazel declared it the best adventure ever. Marin began sketching their shadows dancing on the walls. Rowan watched them laughing together. For the first time since losing his wife, silence no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. Then life tested them again. Hazel developed a serious respiratory infection requiring several days in the hospital. Fear returned instantly. Rowan barely slept. Every machine beep reminded him of another hospital room years before. Old trauma resurfaced with crushing force. Through every exhausting hour, Marin remained nearby. She brought warm meals neither of them remembered eating. She entertained Hazel with tiny watercolor paintings. She encouraged Rowan to close his eyes for 20-minute naps while she monitored the room. She never acted as though helping were an obligation. She simply stayed. Sometimes love announces itself through grand speeches. Other times it quietly sits beside you at 3 in the morning, holding your hand while saying nothing at all. Hazel recovered completely. When they finally returned home, Rowan found a folded note inside one of the hospital books. It was written in Marin's neat handwriting. It simply read that families aren't always born in the same moment. Sometimes they find one another after surviving storms they never deserved. Rowan read those words again and again. Winter arrived. Snow covered rooftops. Holiday lights glowed across neighborhoods. The anniversary of Rowan's wife's passing approached, a day he had always feared. He expected sorrow. Instead, Marin suggested they honor the memory together. They visited the lakeside where Rowan had proposed years earlier. Hazel released biodegradable flower petals into the water. They shared stories, laughed through tears, and remembered someone deeply loved without pretending grief had disappeared. On the drive home, Rowan realized something important. Loving again had never required forgetting. The heart simply learns to grow larger. One crisp afternoon, almost exactly a year after the terrible blind date, Rowan returned to the same cafe. The same table near the window remained empty. Marin smiled knowingly. She remembered every detail. So did he. He reached into his coat pocket. Not with fear. Not with desperation. But with gratitude. Inside rested a small velvet box. He told Marin she had entered his life during the single most humiliating afternoon he could remember. He admitted he hadn't fallen in love because she rescued him. He had fallen in love because she showed him kindness before expecting anything in return. Because she cared about Hazel before trying to impress him. Because she proved ordinary compassion could transform an ordinary day into the beginning of an extraordinary future. With tears filling both their eyes, Rowan asked if she would continue choosing the chair beside him for the rest of their lives. The answer came before he finished asking. Yes. The customers nearby quietly applauded. Not because they had witnessed a dramatic proposal. But because genuine happiness has a way of becoming contagious. Months later, the cafe owner hung a tiny wooden plaque near the window. It carried only 4 words. Someone once said, "Sit here." Most customers never understood its meaning. But Rowan, Marin, and Hazel always smiled whenever they walked past. Because they knew the smallest invitation had rewritten 3 lives forever. Before we reach the end, we have one special request for you. Please comment below with the words, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one small act of compassion can completely transform someone's future. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone special, or renewed your faith in kindness and second chances, please like this video, share it with your friends and family, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts. Your support allows these stories of hope, healing, and unconditional love to reach people who may need them most. Sometimes the greatest love story doesn't begin with perfect timing, magical chemistry, or an unforgettable first impression. Sometimes it begins on the worst day imaginable, when one compassionate stranger notices another person's silent pain and simply says, "Sit here." Those 2 ordinary words became the bridge between heartbreak and healing, loneliness and family, grief and hope. And perhaps that is life's greatest secret, that while we cannot choose the storms that find us, we can choose to become the safe place where someone else finally feels welcome again.